وألوان التعذيب الذي يتعرضون له بأشكال حقيقة لا علاقة لها ولا أساس لها من الصحة ولا الواقع. السجون الآن أصبحت منظومة، يعني السجون أصبحت إقامة فندقية وليست سجون بالمعنى. من كان له مظلمة أو من كان له شكوى أبوابنا جميعا مفتوح، أما أن يلجأ إلى نافذة إعلامية ويبث فيها سمومه ثم يقوم السيد الإعلامي بتبني هذه الأفكار الذي يقولها الشاكي على أنها حقائق ويبني برنامجه عليها ويسقط على الوزارة في أدائها، فهذا يحز في نفسنا كثيرا.
Egypt's daunting prison compounds, home to some of the most notorious jail cells in the Arab world, housing thousands of political prisoners. Behind these walls and beyond the security gates are people whose stories the world knows little about.
سحلوني لغاية ما طلعوني الأوضة فوق ضلمة ما فيهاش غير نور خفيف، ضربت فيها واتكهربت.
بعد ما قلعني قعد يضربني بالأقلام على وشي وعلى عينيا لدرجة إن أنا من كتر الضرب على عينيا أنا ما بقتش شايفة.
ضرب في كل أنحاء جسمك، ال 12 بيضربوا في واحد، يخلصوا في واحد يكوموه.
لا ده في معتقلات كتير في السجون.
Inside a small jail cell lie over 30 prisoners, crammed in a place made to house no more than 4. Locked up, like animals, they pile on top of each other. To the authorities, these people are merely numbers in their prison books. No regard for human dignity is given, let alone human rights. On the ground, stripped of his clothes, this man is beaten relentlessly. In a further attempt to humiliate him, the guard orders him to lie down on his stomach, his face to the ground, and his hands behind his back. The man in the far corner, also stripped naked, is forced to watch. Helpless, unable to save his friend, petrified, knowing that he will be next. The torture continues. The beating increases. Then a voice is heard saying, "The man is dead." Not knowing what to do, the guards try and fan him using their shirts. But the man remains motionless. Desperate, his fellow inmate begins invoking God's name as he recites the call to prayer, hopelessly seeking a miracle. But it's too late. It appears the guards had beaten the life out of him. There have been numerous documented cases of torture in many of Egypt's prisons and police stations. Leaked videos from inside paint a gruesome picture, but still fail to show the full extent of what many prisoners have described as the barbaric and inhumane treatment they are subjected to.
نزلنا لمدة 4 أو 5 أيام، كنا مدمرين خلينا مدمرية مربوطين إيدينا ورجلينا لمدة ال5 أيام دول كلهم، وتم تعذيبنا وتعليقنا من إيدينا ومن رجلينا وضرب وإهانة. كل ده على قوة أمن الدولة. وحصل عندي كسر ب6 ضلوع وجروح غادرة في الإيدين والرجلين، وحصل كسر مضاعف في عظمة القوارة.
There are thousands of untold stories of suffering similar to this man's. But like the victims themselves, most remain locked up, unknown to the outside world. October 31st, 2013. It's 7 a.m. And a group of young Egyptians, mainly girls, have gathered on the sidewalk of the main road in Alexandria. They're part of a student movement that was formed following the July 3rd military coup. Among the girls was Sumaya Sayyid, an 18-year-old university student.
احنا ابتكرنا فكرة جديدة ان احنا ننزل الساعة 7 الصبح، الناس راحة مشاغلها، الصبح ما فيش حد اكيد صاحي، معظم الناس نايمة. قلنا فكرة جديدة ان احنا ننزل، ان احنا نكسر ان احنا بننزل بالليل او بعد العصر او بعد الظهر، يعني احنا ندي صوتنا في وقت تاني الصبح.
But unlike previous mornings when Sumaya and her friends had gathered to protest, October 31st was not going to pass by peacefully. By the end of that day, Sumaya would find herself behind bars.
فالضابط دخل اول ما لقانا قال لنا يلا يا بنت انت وهي اطلعي بره، طلع الطبنجه وانا بتعامل بالنار، تعاملنا كلنا بالنار. فطبعا طلعنا بره لقينا 3 بنات مقعدهم في الشارع بالظبط كأسرى فلسطين، مقعدين في الارض وحاطين ايديهم على راسهم، قال لنا اقعدوا زيهم.
By late 2013, the military's crackdown on opposition in Egypt had resulted in over 14,000 people being thrown in jail. Most of them either rounded up from their homes or during protests against the coup which had overthrown President Mohammed Morsi.
وبعد كده البوكس جه اخدنا، طلعنا قال لنا حطوا ايديكم على كتافكم، طلعنا بكل اهانه، والبندقيه في الظهر كل واحده فينا وتطلع، وشتيمه وزعيق، كل ده في البوكس.
Sumaya's first-hand experience of the security services' brutality was not isolated. In the capital, Cairo, similar scenes occurred on more than one occasion, as more and more young women were rounded up to join the thousands of prisoners already behind bars.
راح ماسكني مدخلني جوه، قلعني النقاب وقلعني الحجاب اللي انا كنت لابساه. بعد ما قلعني قعد يضربني بالله على وشي وعلى عينيا، لدرجه ان انا من كتر الضرب على عينيا انا ما بقتش شايفه. قلت لهم انا مش شايفه انتوا بتعملوا فيا كده ليه؟ ليه؟ بس راحوا ماسكيني غرفه، كانت في غرفه داخل الغرفه اللي هو فيها، راحوا مدخليني جوه، شدني وحاولوا انهم يغتصبوني.
احنا مش مجرمين، احنا لما كنا في السجن المجرمين كانوا بيطلعوا براءة، يعني بتوع المخدرات والسرقة بياخدوا براءة، واحنا ليه يتعمل فينا كل ده انا مش عارفة.
Egypt's prisons, already notorious for their disregard of human rights, it seemed were now being filled with society's most vulnerable.
ده في معتقلات كتير في السجون.
Women from all walks of life have been targeted in a sweeping crackdown on dissent. You know, they include women students detained for protesting peacefully, but they also include lawyers and award-winning human rights defenders. And I think we're also concerned about the conditions that many of these women are being held in. Egypt's prisons and police stations don't seem set up to deal with women detainees. They don't include things like, for example, free sanitary pads. We've also had horrific reports of women being forced to give birth in detention without adequate medical care. And in fact, in at least one case, a woman being forced to give birth while handcuffed.
According to human rights groups, 575 children are known to have been arrested since the 2013 military coup. But that number could be much higher. Many children have gone missing for weeks, only for their families to find out much later that they were in fact locked up. Many of them tortured while in custody.
ثبتوني بمسدس في دماغي والبلطجية ضربوني. ضربت، خدت طلقتين خرطوش، طلقة في رجلي اليمين وطلقة في رجلي الشمال. واحدة اهي. تاني عنوان. ركبوني على فسبة حمراء، ودوني المدرعة، سلموني للضباط. ضربت في المدرعة.
14-year-old Mohammed Taman was arrested by police in the city of Mahalla, accused of attempting to overthrow the regime.
دخلت القسم، سحلوني لغاية ما طلعوني الأوضة فوق ضلمة مفيهاش غير نور خفيف. ضربت فيها واتكهربت. بعد الكهرباء طلعوني التلاجة. قعدت في التلاجة تيجي 3 ساعات، ساعتين 3 ساعات. كنت بغيب عن الوعي، كنت هموت. نزلوا الحجز، واحنا حوالي 18 واحد في سياسي سن اقل من 18 سنة محجوزين في اسم اول المحلة. بيضربونا ضباط، بنتعامل بطريقة كأننا حيوانات، مفيش حق انسان بيحصل لنا ولا بيتحسب. يعني بيطلعنا لما نتضرب بيغموا علينا عشان ما نعرفش مين اللي بيضربنا.
Mohammed's case is one of many. His story similar to other children whose innocence was taken away by what they were forced to endure behind bars.
ال 12 نفر اللي انا قلت عليهم، القياده والرئيس العنبر والسهريه، عصيان ضرب في كل انحاء جسمك. ال 12 بيضربوا في واحد، يخلصوا في واحد يكوموه على اللي بعديه. وانت بقى وصمودك، هم مش هيسيبوك غير لما تقع. عفرت ما عفرتش مش هيسيبوك غير لما تقع. خلاصك كده، انت كده ريحت خالص، يشربك ميه وصابون بقى. ميه وصابون دي بقى عشان يرجعك، يعني بعد ما يفتشك يخليك ترجع، وبعد ما ترجع يخليك تعمل حمام، مش في القعده بره والباب مفتوح.
Torture is rife in Egypt's prisons and police stations. Detainees have told us of a brutal regime of beatings, electric shocks, and stress positions. And one of the former detainees we spoke to said that the walls of their cell were covered in blood. In the last few weeks, we've received disturbing new testimonies of people disappearing from their homes and streets and, you know, being tortured in a secret military prison. This is Egypt going back to the dark days of Hosni Mubarak, and I think many people will wonder what else is happening in the shadows.
What has made the plight of thousands of prisoners go by relatively unnoticed is the fact that those whose job it is to report on them have found themselves too behind bars. At least 49 journalists are currently locked up in Egypt. Among them, 19 from Ras News Network. a social media-based service that was instrumental during the January 25th uprising. They were behind the leaking of secret recordings of former army chief and current president Abdel Fattah al-Sisi.
اتخذنا بطريقه مهينه جدا 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 بدون اذن ضبط واحضار. اتخذنا قعدنا في مكان ما نعرفش احنا قاعدين فين لمده 3 ايام بدون اي تهم موجهه لينا، بدون ما يتحط فينا الكابشن في ايدينا، لحد ما تم اصدار اذن ضبط واحضار لينا. كنا قاعدين كده على الارض بلا وجود حمام، بلا وجود انا ما اعرفش انا قاعد ليه متكلبش، كلبشت خلف. قعدت 3 ايام ما بغيرش هدومي، مش عارف حتى اطلع من الزنزانه اللي انا فيها في مكان اسمه الثلاجه. موجه لنا تهم كتيره جدا، كلها تهم اعلاميه، اللي هو نشر اخبار كاذبه اللي عملت تشوه سمعه مصر في الخارج، نشر اخبار مغلوطه.
It's not about calling it a coup or not a coup. This is about free press, democracy, free press.
Also behind bars are 3 Al Jazeera journalists. Peter Greste, an award-winning former BBC correspondent, sentenced to 7 years in prison. Mohammed Fahmy, an award-winning ex-CNN journalist, also sentenced to 7 years in jail. And Bahir Mohammed, formerly with Japan's Asahi news agency, sentenced to 10 years behind bars.
The trial was a total farce. The prosecution in 12 sessions didn't present a shred of credible evidence that these men had been involved in a terrorist group who had broadcasted false news. Key prosecution witnesses undermined their own written testimony, and in a court of law, in a terrorism trial, we had footage of animal sanctuaries and Kenyan shopping malls. This was a farce from start to finish.
Verdicts which led to unprecedented global outrage. To thousands of journalists worldwide, Egypt, it seemed, had decided that journalism is a crime. Abdullah Shami, also from Al Jazeera, spent over 10 months in jail, more than 3 of them on hunger strike, losing almost half his body weight. While in prison, he had managed to smuggle out a video message which shocked the world.
I have been detained since the 14th of August in Cairo while I was covering the dispersal of Rabaa al-Adawiyya sit-in. I was doing my job as a reporter.
It is not just Egyptians who have had their freedom taken away. Ibrahim Halawa, an Irish citizen, was 17 when he was arrested. He had gone to Egypt for a summer holiday. He's been behind bars ever since.
My name is Mohammed Sultan. I'm 26 years old. I'm an American. Yes, I have Egyptian origins, but I grew up in Kansas City, Boston, Detroit, Columbus, Ohio. I grew up in the United States of America, land of the free, home of the brave. Or at least that's what I was taught growing up about our nation. I graduated from the Ohio State University. I'm a damn proud Buckeye. I'm a huge Boston fan, and I have an unhealthy addiction to Chipotle. See, before getting arrested, I was documenting crimes against justice, against humanity, against democracy in Egypt, trying to share my American principles with young Egyptians, hoping to build bridges between the 2 free generations, the very same youth that President Obama publicly praised following the January 25th revolution. Essentially, my crime is doing exactly what I thought my president wanted me to do.
Mohammed Sultan is another foreigner. Once an activist on Barack Obama's campaign trail, Sultan now finds himself languishing in an Egyptian jail thousands of miles away from home. Already suffering from severe diabetes and other illnesses, Mohammed was transferred to hospital after staging a hunger strike that's lasted over 100 days. Authorities have refused to set him free, despite several medical reports advising that he be released due to his ill health. Mahmoud Abdel Hadi, Safwat Khalil, and Mohammed Al Ghazali are just 3 of at least 80 who've died in custody since the 2013 military coup. There was widespread anger at their funerals. As friends and relatives chanted anti-military slogans, they blamed the authorities for their loved ones' deaths. All of them suffered chronic illnesses, and according to relatives, none of them received medical treatment in jail, and that is what led to their deaths. March 30th, 2014. Thousands of prisoners across the country go on hunger strike, announcing a day of rage. Protests are staged inside the prisons. The prisoners are protesting against their continued mistreatment. They've dubbed this an intifada or uprising. Chants can be heard from outside the prison walls. Even a banner is erected from the jail windows. Across the country, protests are held in support of the prisoners. Friends and relatives take to the streets, risking their own freedom to demand the release of their loved ones. Inside the jails, the unrest continues for several days, but begins to fizzle out after special forces reportedly stormed several prisons to quash the protests. But the anger remains. There are now over 20,000 Egyptians behind bars. And so long as that number continues to rise, together with their suffering, then so too will their anger.
فالادعاء بان هناك تعذيب في السجون ده كلام ليس له اساس من الصحه اطلاقا، لان التعذيب ده يمثل جريمه، وما فيش رجل امن يرتكب جريمه او يزج بنفسه في او يضع نفسه تحت طائله المسؤوليه.